it's Kaitlin, and this week I'm going to be diving through my hashtag on Instagram, hashtag help me Hoyt, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of critiquing, a little bit of redlining, and I'm just kind of using my artistic judgment, I guess, to help you guys improve and yeah, make your pieces just a little bit better, in my opinion. So first up we have Marca Mozart, and they have submitted this really cool chameleon piece done in markers. So I love this piece, but I think there are a few things that we can change to make it just a little bit better. So what I'm doing now is I've got my, I use Paint Tool Sai, which is not a super common program, but it serves the purpose of being a digital software. So you could do this in Photoshop, you could do this in whatever program. I'm not doing anything fancy, I'm just going to be tweaking a couple things and changing some colors. So super, super basic. And I've got half of my screen dedicated to that. So hopefully this works. I've never done anything like this before, so hopefully this goes all to plan. Okay, so first up, I love the textures you've got in the scales. I think that's really interesting. But my main critique would maybe be with the color scheme. I think your colors are a little bit all over the place. So what I'll do is I'll grab just a few different colors that I'm seeing around the piece. So we've got this blue, bright yellow, which I think is like almost completely opposite from each other. So two very competing colors. And we've got like the soft pink of the flowers and more orangey tones in the butterfly. So all in all, and there's also, there's some browns, which do tend to lean towards the orange, which is okay. So my first thing is that these colors are quite competitive with each other, like especially when you have a blue and a yellow next to each other. Since they are complementary colors, they're going to be kind of fighting for your attention. So when you use a complementary palette, you're going to want to try and use it as like a 70-30 ratio. So you want primarily the piece to be either in that blue or in that yellow, like just, and not equal portions, because then it gets a little bit too busy on the eyes. So I would say, like, when I first look at this piece, my eye goes straight to that yellow pattern on the chameleon rather than the face, which is generally what you want the focal point to be, is the eyes, right? So I'm going to dull down this blue or this yellow color a little bit. Just kind of add more blue. It's going to be super rough, so, you know, keep in mind that it's not going to look super cohesive or great or anything like that, but we'll just kind of serve a little bit of a representation of what I think would work best in this scenario. So the chameleon has this like brown around the edges, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure if this is like a real species or not, but alright, so here you can see it's a little bit more toned down. So I'll take it on and off. So now that the color is a little bit less focused, here, I'll get this out of the way. It just kind of allows your eyes to rest a little bit, and it's not so focused on that competing color scheme, especially when they're right next to each other. It's the same as having like black right beside white. Areas of the highest contrast are going to be where your eye goes initially. So these two colors, where there's such a high contrast, that's where your eye is going to go. And of course there are yellow eyes here, but because they were smaller and less detailed than the details of this, they automatically got a little bit less attention. So we want a little bit less detail in this pattern, even if that, you know, the reference photo, even that had a bunch of yellow markings, just like the way that you had represented it, then that's when, you know, our artistic decisions kind of come in handy, and we kind of pick and choose and design just kind of based on those principles. So, okay, I'll stop noodling with that. So that's that. And then next, I think there's also kind of a competition between the warms and the cools here. So the flowers are a warm color, the background is a cool color, the chameleon's cool, and then the Of course, the markings are warm, and then the butterfly is warm. So again, you kind of want to strive for like a 70-30 split, even with the warms and cools. So I think what this piece could use is maybe a little bit of warmth in the actual background here. So let me see what that looks like. Well, I'll just maybe grab like a dark, maybe like a dark brown, and just see what warming up the background looks like. So now that I'm adding this color too, it is a little bit darker than the initial green that you had down. So there is a little bit extra contrast there as well. Okay. All right, so that's with the brown. And I think I do actually like that better because I find that having the brown background actually makes the flowers look a little bit more warm. Because before they looked a little bit neutral. They didn't necessarily fit the palette of everything else, but with the addition of the brown, it kind of brings it into that orangey brownish realm. Yeah, really, really good job with this. I really do like the stylization, and the scales add a really nice depth in the shading and everything. Like the fact that this is in markers is crazy. So markers is kind of a challenging one. So yeah, my advice to you next time going into another piece would be to maybe come up with like a more of a restricted color palette. So I generally like to go with like 3 main colors, and then any subsequent colors are kind of variations of those main 3. So like darker or lighter versions of it. And there still could be some changes made, like the flowers, I think, whether they're so bright, I think they're also kind of competing for some of the attention. So maybe I would darken those. I'm just going to go to like a multiply layer. A little bit bigger. And these are all going to be really messy because it's, I'm not trying to redo your guys' pieces. That's not my goal. It's just to give you a really rough example of these changes so that if you did want to implement them, then you can do that yourself. Okay, so that is the darker flowers. And I actually do think I like that. I can maybe tone it down a little bit. So what I'm looking for is I'm squinting. So if you have a navigation if you're using digital software, a little viewfinder, that's really helpful. Otherwise, stepping back, squinting your eyes, even taking a photo of it with your phone and then kind of looking at it through that different perspective, really helpful for like picking up on weird colors or particularly with like value discrepancies. Yeah, I don't know if I'm crazy about that, but I do think they need to be darker. I think we could maybe go with a different color. Alright, so this is the finished version with my edits. I'll combine everything together and then show you. This is before, after. Before, after. But that's what I would recommend for this one. So thank you so much for submitting. Okay, next up we have Flu Free. And they submitted this really cool piece of a cat with like some glowing kind of spacey intestines. So right out the gate, I really like the concept of this piece. I think it's really cool, and I love the lighting that you've got here. A lot of really cool features that I think make this a really interesting piece. But there are a couple questions I have. So when I look at it, my first kind of question is like, what's going on? So I think it lacks maybe a little bit of narrative, or maybe I'm just not getting it. But is it flying? Is it jumping? Why is the intestines, coming out of it? What happened? And it is good to have these kind of questions when you look at a piece because it just kind of invokes a little bit more of that storytelling. But I think all of these different features that you have are kind of all over the place. So there's no real resolution to the story, or there's no... It feels like there was no like solid intention there when you started it. So and if you just want to go in and like showcase this concept you have of the glowing intestines, and like that's totally okay. But then I think it would be almost better to omit the sky background and just focus like maybe something more simple, more neutral, or more like graphic designy, just to kind of emphasize that main feature here. So let's see. All right, so first things first, if we were to go with it that it's maybe jumping into the sky, then I think we have a couple anatomy issues here. So this leg, it'd be a little bit, this is a little bit too extended if it were jumping. So because of foreshortening, this would actually be probably further up here. So I'm going to cover the background. So I think that works a little bit more as far as like the actual anatomy goes. I don't necessarily think that it's like a totally accurate jumping pose still, but I think that would be a pretty good place to start. So yeah, so beyond the anatomy issues with that, I do like that its arms are kind of splayed out. I think that's really interesting. But I think it actually might be more interesting, unless you did have like a very specific narrative with this, is to maybe even change the pose a little bit. So say we wanted to focus on the cat and its intestines. So yeah, if I were approaching this drawing, I think I would kind of keep the paws splayed out like you've got and keep that really cool expression that it has. But then almost do something a little bit more like almost maybe like roadkill, I think would be a fun place to go, like a space. Maybe it was run over by like a space car or something. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. But like here you would see more of those intestines, and you could even kind of design that in a way that looked really visually appealing and looked more intentional than what you've got in your own piece. So it's that really cool expression. So like that would be, obviously this is a really rough example, but I think something like that showcases your concept off a little bit more. And otherwise, I'd say, like, if you were to keep the piece as is, there is maybe a little bit of a contrast issue happening between the intestines and the light sky. So I think what you could do to remedy this is to darken up the area right behind, and then just kind of move those cloudy skies, or the light in the clouds up a little bit more, just so that it doesn't intersect with the light of the actual intestines. Okay, so I did one more thing. I kind of darkened a little bit further up the cat's torso, so it didn't compete with the didn't make like a tangent between the light of the intestine and the actual clouds. So, and there's one more thing I think I would like to do that I think would be really cool, and I think making these a little bit more glowy would be cool. And also, I think you could change maybe one of these to be a little bit less long. Here, let me fix this. Because you want them to be different sizes, right? Otherwise, they're going to be kind of competing and a little bit confusing. So, yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. So those are my changes. And then this is the original. So mine, original, mine, original. So you can see I kind of changed the contrast. So that's kind of the reoccurring theme with a lot of artwork, is they're not really pushing the values enough. And I think I'm particularly cognizant of it because I really struggle with that. That's something that I'm constantly trying to be like, okay, is it dark enough? Is it light enough? Is there enough contrast? So I'm like hyper aware of it when I look at everybody else's work too. So thank you so much for submitting, and hopefully you learned a thing or two here. All right, and finally we have Skirtina. So they submitted this really nice piece of like a hellhound or like a dragon dog, and it's kind of like looking off down at the ground with some cool dragon wings. So I think there's a couple things that we can change here. So mainly what I see is kind of an issue with the anatomy in the dragon wings. So let's lower the opacity and kind of draw over and see what we can do with that. So bat wings are are hard, I'm not gonna lie, but there's something like this. So you have the shoulder point, the elbow, and then like the wrist. So it's kind of, think of it as like a human arm. And then all of these kind of extensions are like the fingers. So this is kind of how I draw them. Which, you know, maybe not super accurate, but it doesn't have to be like 100% accurate so much as it, you just need to have kind of like a base understanding so that you can stylize the wings in a little bit more of a stylized way that works for you and your style. So yeah, I would make the wings a little bit more like that. And then let's see, I think maybe the head, here, let's take these wings away for now. And I think the head is maybe a little bit too big, so let's shrink that down. And I actually think that my bat wings maybe aren't coming out at the right points, because like the shoulder is here, right? So something like that anyway. That's okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, it's just an example. And then I would say if you wanted to really make this piece have a little bit more of a narrative to it, rather than just having your dog character just kind of sitting, then I think that we could kind of exaggerate the emotion that I'm seeing in this piece. Whether it's intentional or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I would say if I were to do this myself, I would maybe do something a little bit more like with a defined line of action. So really arching that back, kind of exaggerating the tilt of that head, sad droopy ears, maybe like a sad expression, and then you could really use those wings to kind of help emphasize that curve. Here, I'll hide this one for now. And then the legs, and then we want like the shoulders here, kind of tight. And then almost to have like the tail wrapping around and kind of really exaggerating that silhouette, I think would be really interesting. But that's just me. Like if this kind of sad pose isn't what you were going for, then like, you know, totally don't have to do this. This is just what I would do. But otherwise, like, it's a pretty, like, a solid drawing. I love how you have this blue. It's like a light blue for the highlight, which I think is beautiful, rather than just having it be like a lighter gray or like a white. I love that. Pretty solid. Love your lines. Your anatomy is like almost there. I'd say you could even like cut that out a little bit more, thicken up that thigh. And then with the paws, I would do, let's see, this. You just kind of want to think about it as like having a little bit of an ankle, or I guess a wrist. So that's how I would do the paws personally, just a very rough stylized version. But so yeah, just doing a little bit of research on anatomy, and then otherwise, you know, you've got a great start. Okay, so there's with the colors, and I actually noticed one more thing too. With the head here, you want to think about it as like a three-dimensional form, right? So it helps if we kind of superimpose a sphere. So here's your head. Here's our center line. Here are our eyes. And then we have one horn here, and then the other horn comes from like the back of the head. So it actually should come from around here. So you see kind of where that issue is. So it actually kind of looks something like this. And that's just something that comes with more perspective. So which is totally challenging in its own right. So yeah, take it easy on yourself there. But yeah, otherwise, pretty solid. So I will merge everything together and then kind of show you the before and after. Okay, so here we have mine and then the before. So before, after, before, after. So pretty minor changes overall, mostly just an anatomical thing. Okay, thank you so much, Sigurtina, for submitting to the hashtag on Instagram. And hopefully this is a little bit helpful to you. And that's it for me, guys. So I hope you guys liked this kind of format. Hopefully it was a little bit helpful, even to those of you who I didn't get a chance to select. A lot of these different themes and subjects that I'm talking about would kind of be applied to your own art as well. So hopefully you can kind of watch these and apply some of the things that I'm talking about to your own work. And yeah, that's it for me. Again, if you like topics like this and me kind of doing more critiques, then give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. Okay, thanks so much, guys. See you later.